Class is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone, welcome to another CW webinar. I am Wanderson and me and my colleague are here to discuss CW views on the pressing topic. What is the best suited CCUS technology for the cement industry? For today's presentation, I would like to introduce myself, Wanderson Teixeira, Business Analyst at CW Group, based in Portugal, as well as my colleague Prashant Singh, Director at CW Group, based in our Indian office. On this page, you can find our contact details, so please feel free to reach out to any of us in case you have any questions or would like to get in touch to discuss CW services. On today's agenda, we're going to start with an introduction of our company, what it is that we do, and how we can help you make business informed decisions, as well as a brief overview of the reports that we normally use to prepare our presentations. We also have prepared a macroeconomic overview, and of course, we have prepared an overview of the carbon capture, storage, and use technology, starting with an electricity and fuel analysis, and going over the adoption of the CCUS technologies, operational costs, CO2 emissions reductions, and technologies readiness within the cement industry, and also main regulations on carbon capture technologies, to then leave you with our closing remarks. So to start, CW is currently present across three distinct verticals: the advisory, research, and media. Under the advisory branch, CW works with major global consultants and leading institutions. That includes the World Bank, IFC, and also sovereign wealth funds and consulting projects. We provide consulting and advisory expertise on a diverse product portfolio. And during the past couple of years, more in these past months where we have been witnessing a challenging time, we also have helped multiple industry participants in their decision-making process. And this includes circular economy potential assessment across industries in Africa, where we provided a quantification of potential circular economy opportunity for more than 20 markets, in which we named initiatives, policies, and also regulations that can support circular economy as well as its potential reduction of CO2 emissions. And we also have helped other clients working on a West African cement market assessment in collaboration with an important leading institution. Second, we have the research umbrella. Under the research umbrella, CW focus on producing syndicated reports. Those reports cover areas like cement, building materials, patch coke, bulk shipping, also paper and pulp, and other chemical products. We are very well known for our studies on cement demand globally, as well as detailed industry and country reports. We also provide historical and forecasts for markets in a variety of products. This includes our most famous product, the Volume Forecast Report, more commonly known as VFR. We also have the Trade Prices Report, our TPR. We have the White Cement Report and many other reports that you can have a look at our official website. We also provide commodity price assessments for both cement and clinker. And last but not least, we have the media umbrella, in which by subscribing, we provide online access to our vast database. We also provide newsletters focused on cement, building materials, patch coke, bulk shipping, and also paper and pulp with the latest industry news. And we have returned to our in-person meetings, and our next conference, called Cement Business and Industry Brazil and Latin and Alternative Fuels and Raw Materials 2023, is scheduled to happen next year in March in São Paulo. as well as other conferences that we have scheduled for the first and second half of the year. So for more details, please do not hesitate to contact us so we can help you with those conferences as well. So to start off our presentation, I would like to go over the global economic outlook for 2022. As you can see here in this slide, we have charts where we show our global economic outlook by the World Bank, more recently the IMF and OECD. According to IMF's October update, the global economic growth is estimated at around 3.2% in 2022 and further 2.7% in 2023. This has been categorized as one of the weakest growth since 2001, with the exception, of course, of the global financial crisis and the acute phase of COVID-19. And this growth is a reflection of significant slowdown for the largest economies, which includes the US, the euro area, and China. The US and euro area GDPs have declined in the first half of the year, while China witnessed a prolonged COVID-19 outbreaks and lockdowns on top of a growing property sector crisis. Moreover, we have about a third of the world economy facing 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth. More specifically, in the West, GDP is expected to grow by 1.6%, which it's slightly lower from this 5.7% growth in 2021. This growth has been revised downwards from IMF's July update by 0.7 percentage points, reflecting the unexpected GDP contraction in the second quarter of the year. We have, for example, declining real disposable incomes that continues to reduce consumer demand. And on top of that, we have higher interest rates that are taking a toll on spending, especially in residential investments. In the case of Europe, as you can see in the chart, we have a growth of 3.1% projected for this year. And for 2023, we have a much smaller growth of 0.5% expected. This is an upward revision from July's update due to a stronger than expected second quarter outturn in most of the euro area economies. We have economies like Italy and Spain that witness a recovery in tourism-related services and also industrial production the first half of the year. And countries like these are contributing to a growth in the region. And more specifically, Italy and Spain are expected to see a growth of 3.2 and 4.3% respectively this year. However, for next year, we expect a weak growth across Europe, reflecting the spillover effects from the Russia-Ukraine conflict, which has especially sharp down revised the economies for the economic aspects for the economies that are most exposed to the Russian gas supply cuts. When it comes to Russia, we expect the IMF expects a contraction of almost 8%, which is being actually less severe than what was expected earlier, reflecting the resilience in crude oil exports and also in domestic demands with a greater fiscal and monetary policy support from the government. Meanwhile, we have the emerging and developing Asia, where we are expected to see a growth of 4.4% this year, representing also a downward revision from July. This is mostly due to the downgrade for growth in China, which is expected to see an economic growth of 3.2% this year. This is the lowest growth in more than 4 decades. Of course, we see the COVID-19 outbreaks and lockdowns, as well as the worsening property market crisis, had held back economic activities in China, therefore leading to this downgrade in growth. Meanwhile, we have the World Bank, which has recently reported that spillovers from the Russia-Ukraine conflict are expected to sharply hasten the deceleration of global economic activity, which is now, according to them, expected to see a growth of 2.9% in 2022 and a growth of 3% in 2023. The conflict is leading to high commodity prices that we have seen for the past couple of months, which adding to supply disruptions has contributed to tighter financial conditions and also increased policy uncertainty. And moreover, we have the OECD with their most recent update released in September, predicting a global economic growth of 3% for this year. We see them reporting that global economic growth stalled in the second quarter of 2022, and many economies are indicating an extended period of subdued growth. More severe fuel shortages especially for gas, also could reduce the growth in Europe by a further 1.2 percentage points in 2022 as well. Meaning that in conclusion, global economic outlook for this year remains gloomy as the world continues to witness the impact of this Russia-Ukraine conflict. And we see also a slowdown in major economies, including US, China, and India. In our next slide, we have prepared a summary of the main sanctions applied by Western economies on Russia. Before we wanted to show this before we could jump actually to the adoption of CCUS technologies, given the impact of those sanctions adopted by major economies on Russia and also on its energy sector. Russia is facing a challenging scenario due to the Western sanctions, which are already damaging the economy and are expected to further damage more in the next decade. Nevertheless, in terms of oil output, despite these sanctions, Russia continues to see a growth in crude oil production. However, we see them more recently in October, given the annexation of Ukraine's Donetsk, Luhansk, and also other regions. We have seen not only the European Union, but also the US adopting new economic sanctions. Being adopted as a response to those annexations. For example, the European Union has adopted the 80th sanction package so far, and this includes a series of bidding measures that are intended to reinforce pressure on the Russian government and also on their economy, therefore weakening Russia's military capabilities and also making somehow Kremlin pay for this recent escalation in the conflict. And when it comes to the US, also new sanctions were adopted as a response to the same. And these new sanctions, they target scores of Russian parliament members, also government officials, and industry supplying the Russian military, including international suppliers. This, for European countries, in terms of consequence, given Europe's dependency on Russian gas, puts the concerns across the region because with that, governments have rushed to import natural gas in order to fill up their storage. And what we see now is that what happens now is that with the unusual warm weather that we have, combined with the successful bidding for cargoes, we see many facilities that are almost full before Europeans actually need to use the natural gas for heating. So with that, we see gas prices starting to fall back, being less than a third of their summer peak. However, this is a scenario that is very unstable, meaning that it can change quickly. That's going to depend not only on the weather, also on how Russia could still end flows of gas that transit through Ukraine, which would add an upward pressure on prices and also making filling storage more difficult for next year. Now, when it comes to the consequences for cement production, we see that even though gas prices have been declining and also electricity prices are following the same trend, they remain really high. Therefore, this continues to impact cement production across many countries, and forcing producers to continue to focus on just being operational and viable financially than actually investing for strategic investments, which include the carbon capture, at least in the short to medium term. Uh, so while cement companies are aware that this is a necessary step to be taken, the current macroeconomic environment with higher inflation and also additional transport costs is likely to push this decision back, uh, at least in the coming years. In our next slide, we wanted to show what has been the inflation rate so far and what is the evolution. In terms of inflation, we have seen a surge in the past couple of years given all of the geopolitical and macroeconomic scenario. The IMF's latest prediction for global inflation is of around 8.8% this year, from a 4.7% in 2021, and this represents an upward revision of 0.5 percentage points since the July's update. Forecasts for most economies have been revised upwards since July, and on a four-quarter basis, we have the projected global inflation peaking at 9.5% in the third quarter of this year before actually declining to 4.7% in the fourth quarter of 2023. This upward inflation revision is especially large for advanced economies, which are expected to see a rise from 3.1% last year to 7.2% this year. And we also have, in the case of the US, an expected inflation of 8.1% for 2022, which is likely to drive the group's inflation rates upwards. According to the IMF, we expect inflation to cool down in 2023 and 24, with forces shaping the outlook pointing to a faster disinflation in advanced economies than actually in the emerging market and developing economies. However, we have several factors that could delay the moderation of these inflation rates, including further shocks of energy and food prices. Now, starting our CCUS technology analysis, in this next slide, before we actually jump into the study, we decided to prepare an overview of the energy prices evolution so you can better understand the impact on production costs and also transportation costs. As of September, bunker fuel prices have declined by around 14% in the Med Basin on a month-to-month, while in the same period prices have dropped 2% in the Persian Gulf and 9% in Northern Europe. In terms of crude oil prices, we started to see prices increase a little bit as of yesterday. So Brent crude prices were $96 a barrel, while the WTI was 88 a barrel. These prices have been witnessing an increase partially due to decline in the value of the dollar. And additionally, we also see crude oil inventories in the US rising by around 4.5 million barrels in the week ending October 21, which is exceeding previous projections. Now, when it comes to electricity prices, we see European power tariffs have been declining due to the mild weather, as I mentioned before, and also natural gas prices that are falling to multi-month lows. However, we also see that this decline in electricity prices does not mean that the energy crisis in the region is over. Even as the European governments roll out relief packages to curb these high energy power prices. Of course, this decline will depend not only on the weather remaining mild, but also on how responsible people will be to appeals to turn down the heating, and also how much demand there will be from Asian economies for scarce energy supplies. Now, to continue with our presentation, I would like to pass to my colleague, Prashant. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time and attention.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much, Vanderston. And if you could just move to the next slide. So, in many respects, this is the start of the actual review. And as you're all aware, we had a short review last week, like a few weeks ago, about this technology. And today we will sort of delve a little bit deeper into what we had initiated in the last week of September. So just to give you a brief overview, there are basically 5 main technologies that are currently available for retrofitting at cement plants. And while all of these technologies have their pros and cons, some are more capital intensive, some are more resource intensive, and some require significantly more space allocation within cement plants, which would mean additional reconfiguration and additional costs. Now, most cement plants around the world have adopted some kinds of production efficiency measures to minimize costs, which basically leaves the door open to the next level of cost optimization, of technological advancement, which is, CCUS. But the problem with CCUS is that some of these technologies have been in the development stage for almost a decade and are now only graduating from small scale prototypes to industrial scale plants. And so a key factor, which is the long lead times, is very critical because this requires the presence of a strong regulatory and financial framework in terms of government support to make this a viable option for the industry. And Europe has been one of the forerunners of this development. And in Europe, we have 6 to 7 different technologies that are in different stages of implementation. And we expect that by 2027 to bear some sort of a concrete result where we can see by 2030 actual full-scale commercialization. So even in the most advanced region of the world in terms of CCUS, we still expect a lead time of another 7 years before it becomes viable. As you can imagine, what that means for the rest of the world, including Europe, Africa, Asia, and sort of South America. So there are considerable challenges before this technology is sort of widespread at the same sort of expectation that people have for this in Europe. On this next slide, what we have tried to incorporate, and which we shared last time, is a matrix which encapsulates the different levels and challenges of these technologies, and which we will also then now take next step level in a few slides, where you will see the costs associated with the implementation of these technologies. Now, out of these technologies, the most favored and most implementable is the MEA, and it is the only technology that has matured enough to have full-scale implementation on a commercial basis, which does not mean that it is the best option. It just means that this is the technology that has graduated to the level from small-scale pilot projects to a level where it can be implemented and has been shown to be successful to be incorporated in existing cement plants without major retrofitting issues, which is a significant advantage vis-a-vis some of the other ones that you see highlighted. And it is essential to understand that cement, and as you're all aware, cement is a very conservative industry. Asking them to change into a different process, something they have been doing for multiple decades, is not going to be easy, no matter how attractive or the marketing around this processes are. And that is why we see like some headway, significant headway maybe, by major players in Europe who are doing large-scale tests. But these are only a small representation of sort of the overall industry. And currently, of all of these technologies, the two which sort of have the most promising, or three most promising, are MEA, CAP, and the CAL. With oxy-fuel, as we will see, having the best cost reduction per ton on the pilot projects, but without a commercial viable plant to actually demonstrate that. On the next slide, as you will see, why has CCUS met such resistance, and why has it not been sort of adapted as quickly as we would have thought it would be? Well, primarily because there are still some proven and time-tested opportunities that exist for the industry to take advantage of, which it has not fully embraced. The simplest and perhaps the easiest and most impactful one is the reduction of the clinker cement ratio. There are regions, like including Europe and Asia, where the clinker to cement ratio is like between 65 to 70. But there are countries in Africa, major countries in Africa, where still the cement clinker ratio is 80 and above, for example, Nigeria, and in the US, where it's still very, very predominantly clinker driven. There is significant opportunity to reduce the clinker ratio by using other supplementary materials, including, calcined clay, slag, and others, to a ratio of 65-70, which would have a dramatic impact in sort of reduction because of the fear factor of the large-scale investment required for CCUS and the necessary regulatory framework, which is also required. But just as important is the storage and the utilization. There is still not enough discussion about sort of how to appropriately get this to the right storage areas, what are the transportation modicums to be adopted, and how will this be utilized later. On the right-hand side, you can see that there is a technologically readiness level assessment, and the absorption is clearly way ahead in terms of the other technologies, followed only by calcium looping. The other projects still require incubation time, at least another 3 to 4 years before they can be in a level where they can have a commercial scale project. So you can understand what this means in terms of timeline and development, that we would be in the early 2030s, 35, before these projects are mature enough that they, other companies would say, okay, we're going to adopt this as a full-scale technology and implement this. Now, just to give you an understanding of how resistant the industry could be in terms of CCUS, F.L. Schmidt held a not scientific poll, mind you, last year, and spoke to like 66 different sort of people from the industry regarding their expectations of CCUS and its implementation timeline. And around 45% said that they expected the CCUS would be an important technology by 2030. An additional 31% of the respondents said they expected at least 10% of the global cement industry to have CCUS operational by 2030, which leaves a significant number of 24% of respondents who either said that they expected CCUS only after seeing flying cars, and 10% who said that, you know, they were not in the least concerned or bothered about CCUS before 2030. They didn't see this happening. So there is significant, dissension as to within the industry whether this is truly the savior or whether we have actually utilized all our available tools to the maximum level before we go into these large-scale investments and long lead times that are required. So if we go on to the next slide, like any industrial project and like any other project, we see that there are many layers of cost before arriving at the total project cost. And in addition to this complexity is the fact that there are only a handful of full-scale commercial projects globally, which may or may not be an appropriate benchmark because of different regional factors. The regulatory financial support network, the environmental conditions in Europe is very different than sub-Saharan Africa, which is very different than mainland China, which is different than Asia, and certainly in South America. So there is no cohesive policy that, you know, that we could see that would be applicable. Also, given the long horizon we have for these projects, there remains significant concern about cost escalations which can occur. So for example, a lot of these projects, and I'll show you some of the cost expectations, were done on a cost basis for energy at, you know, maybe 66 euros per megawatt, which in the current environment, because of this conflict, are no longer conceivable or practical. So there are so many different factors in assigning a total cost that many of these companies are wary of sort of the long investment cycles required. And because of the fact that they have, they're operating in markets with a very, very strong, shareholder impact, they cannot seem to be investing in, shall we say, futuristic technologies without assurance of adequate ROI. And also another factor to consider is the impact of the maintenance costs or downtime of particular CCUS technologies on a cement plant's operating schedule, and therefore its own financial impact. Now, I wanted to give you a picture of some of the major studies that we have come across and some of the costs that they have outlined. And this is an adequate summary where you see that while the MEA technology is certainly, in terms of total plant costs, most cost effective. However, if you look at the cost of CO2 avoided, it is definitely the highest. So what goes to show is that these other technologies which have not been commercialized hold the potential to be much, much more cost effective, even if the capital outlay at the outset, investment at the outset, is higher. Over time, they have a much better cost ratio. So, but before any decision can be taken, comprehensively, we need sort of large-scale commercial projects for these different technologies. These costs are on small-scale pilot projects, while the operating conditions were same for all of them. Real-world conditions are very different and would therefore definitely have different cost metrics. But this is a good understanding that while some of these processes are still developmental, they have significant advantages over what are perceived to be established CCUS processes. If we go to the next slide. Now, what you see here is a very good and clear indication of who dominates the CCUS pipeline. You see Europe and North America accounting for the vast majority of projects, with only Taiwan and India having small pipelines. Mainland China is missing from this picture because they don't really have any full-time CCUS projects in pipeline currently. However, it is absolutely clear if CCUS is to become viable, there needs to be implementation of a massive scale from China. It is the only way that this process or this technology can become viable. And that has not, while the Chinese have been making the right noise in terms of capacity rationalization and sort of improving the quality of equipment, we have seen a digression in terms of the clinker to cement ratio, which has actually gone up because they have stopped 32.5 rate a couple of years ago. So the Chinese cement industry needs to be a major player in terms of adoption before this becomes viable. As you can see, the lead has been taken by European, firms, including Heidelberg Materials, Holcim, and Vicat. The lone couple of other examples being like Dalmia Cement in India, which is doing a major project. But this is not enough in terms of a global variety to make an impact. So when we go to the next slide, what I would like to show you here on the slide is, this is the legal and regulatory framework indicator sponsored by the global CCS Institute. And if you look at India and China, their framework, regulatory framework points are only 32 and 27 out of 100, vis-a-vis whereas the United States is at a 73% score in deep blue. In terms of their requirement for China and India, China and India require a requirement level of 86 for China and 66 for India. But their readiness for implementation of these technologies is only at 53 and 22 points. So there is a significant variation in terms of which countries require and where they are in terms of the regulatory framework. Their storage indicators of capability is slightly better, but they're far lacking the buy-in from not only the industry, but also the government in these countries. And without these two countries being a major player, the global cement industry really has no hope of sort of making CCUS a commercially viable technology that can reach the emissions targets that the industry has over the next couple of decades. So with that, food for thought, I would like to sort of sum up the closing points. As you can see, the global economic growth continues to be impacted by various geopolitical factors that are, that are out of our hands. In addition, we've seen sort of OPEC Plus cutting oil prices. It's bound to impact oil prices going forward, even though there is an economic sort of downturn forecast. Oil prices are not expected to decline significantly due to those cuts. Inflation is expected to stay high. Food inflation is there because there's always talk you can in the news about sort of Russia not keeping its bargain about the Ukraine grain deal. There's sustained high levels of energy and fuel costs that are affecting viability of cement plants. In a way, perhaps this is good because it's going to force cement plants to look at alternative fuels and other renewable energy sources. But in the short term, this is a very, a financial concern, which therefore again puts into question whether these plants will be willing to put up the money for CCUS projects at this current financial climate. The CCUS itself, technologies, is also impacted by insufficient use of actual present technologies that have been there. As discussed previously, we haven't seen enough utilization of the clinker cement ratio, which could have a higher impact in terms of emissions cuts than CCUS itself. And again, the different CCUS technologies competitiveness will help us sort of figure out which of these is the most financially viable and commercially implementable, so that this can be replicated across the regions. But more than that, what this shows is that there is a requirement for a strong regulatory and financial framework, not only within Europe, North America, but globally, that will support these projects. And the buy-in from China and India is crucial for this to be successful for the industry. So with that, I want to thank you all for your time, and we look forward to hearing back from you and meeting you in our next presentation. Thank you so much. Have a great day.